with such a low image. It's been proved that in motorway carnage, the commercials play a very dangerous part indeed. We now know, sadly, that half the people who are killed in private cars and light vans are killed in collision with heavy vehicles. Who's to blame? Well, we know of the cowboy drivers. We know of the hauliers who overload their vehicles so they won't handle and they can't stop when we do. We know the law is sometimes at fault, and how can anybody think of bringing the common market giants into this country? But the encouraging thing, the plus side of this show, is the industry are aware of that image. And the whole theme of this show is safety and environment. With more power, better braking, more comfort for the driver, less noise, less pollution, and in fact, easier maintenance and accessibility, so the hauliers have no excuse. This is the biggest headlight in the world, certainly the biggest you'll see at this commercial motor show. It's the British Lucas firm's contribution to improving safety. Its great feature, it's 11 inches in diameter, is that it throws exactly the same candle power when it's dipped as when it's on full beam. And that means that a driver, and let's face it, these vehicles can thunder along at 60 miles an hour, is getting a full 150 feet of good visibility. Very important indeed. But when we're sitting on the motorway in our cars and we see a big truck thundering up behind us, isn't it nice to feel that it's probably been properly maintained? And the star feature of this new Foden is that they've helped the lazy operator, or in fact the lazy driver. It does, you see, cost any haulage firm something like £50 a day for every day that a vehicle's off the road. So perhaps, if it's difficult to maintain, you can understand why they skimp it. But they've no excuses with this one. All you do is pull this handle, and the whole of the front lifts up. This is for a daily check, obviously your radiator water level. This is your power steering. You can top up, and surely with the weather we've got coming, you can top up the windscreen washers. Interesting to note here, by the way, there's twin heaters for the cab and for demisting. Now, if it's a bigger job and you want to check something else, you don't have to crawl in down the bonnet. Pull up one very neat pin, and lo and behold, the whole radiator comes down, and you can get at the fan belt, you can check the alternator, you can work on the air compressor. Surely now there's no excuse for not checking things, and if it's a big job, the whole cab tilts up. But Fodens haven't left anything to chance. In case people haven't made these checks, they've developed a very special warning system. Let's now have a look in the cab. This really is quite something, this cab. It's not surprising that we see lorry drivers in suits now instead of overalls. They've got their radio, they've got beautiful heating, the steering wheel adjusts, the seat adjusts up and down, there's an armrest for the mate. But the important thing is that the man who's concentrating on his driving and has all these things working for him gets an instant and very audible warning if anything goes wrong. Just have a look at this panel. Suddenly, an audible sign stop, and you can read the word stop, and what's the problem? It's oil pressure. We've set this up so we can show what would happen if there was an emergency. Exactly the same for water temperature, radiator level, and perhaps most important of all, for the three braking systems.
When the transport manager of a company comes here to see this great parade of the heavies, and incidentally there's some 50 new ones for him to see, the decision he makes to buy a lorry, an articulated truck or what have you, or a fleet of them, can in fact determine the company's future for many years, because the price of these is anything from £5,000 upwards. And by the time he has put on his trailer, his articulated vehicle, it can cost him something like £8,000. You'd expect to get about 30,000, 40,000 miles a year out of them. If he's going to drive them particularly hard, flog them, he can get 100,000. But take this Super Buffalo, for example. You can, in fact, put a drawbar and a trailer on the back. That will make it 60 feet long. And how much do they pay when they put that disc up there? It costs you and me £25. It costs them £490. And it costs them at least £7,500 a year to operate. Now, they do say, but if only we would allow them to increase the load factor on all these vehicles, the cost of goods in the shop will go down. I wonder.
I suppose it has to be said that we motorists are a fairly perverse lot when it comes to heavy trucks. When they're behind us, we don't want them to have too much speed. When they're in front of us, especially going up a steep hill, we want them to get a move on. So power is a big talking point at this Earl's Court show. But if you look at this giant 6-cylinder Leyland diesel, you can see that the manufacturers are doing their bit to try and get their lorries moving quickly. 220 horsepower, which can pull 32 tons at nearly 60 miles an hour. And in fact, all the diesel engines at this show meet a brand new British standard 6 brake horsepower per ton to get the lorries moving, especially on the inclines. All right, you say? Now they can get past us, they're in front of us on a hill. But what about the other problem we object to from the trucks? The black smoke from the diesel engine. Well, the manufacturers, not unnaturally, get fairly aggrieved about this. They say that with their complicated metering units and their injectors, no black smoke should come out of this exhaust when it gets to the back near our windscreen. They do their job, the haulage trade should maintain them properly and do their job. But they add, controversially, and I find this very interesting indeed, that if we do find black smoke creeping into our cockpit, although it may be unpleasant, it's not doing our health any harm. In fact, they say to sit behind a diesel engine is far safer than to sit behind another car, which is puffing carbon monoxide at us.
Mr. Ellis, whatever happened to the gas turbine, which we have had so many hopes?
Well, the gas turbine, of course, is a research and development program. It's still going ahead. You can see the engine here on the stand. And since the last show, of course, we've got them in traffic with the major oil companies. And it's still showing a great deal of promise, but it's about 2 years away from production.
How worried are you by the image that the truck people have got because of the cowboys, because of the tipping lorries and so on? Because it doesn't have a very good image, does it?
It doesn't, and we're very, very concerned about it. We're also concerned about the facts of the case being distorted. People are a bit apt to say that we're looking for bigger lorries, but in fact we're not. We're looking for lorries that will carry a heavier weight. That they will not be more obtrusive, they will not be more noisy, and they won't be more smoky either.
They won't be. I'll come to the cleaner bit in a minute, but I was thinking much more of the sort of cowboy image that the truckers got, and getting a very bad name throughout the country.
Well, this is disappearing very rapidly because the transport companies are growing into much bigger units. They're more professional in their business now than they were 10 or 20 years ago. And the number of cowboys about on the road due to the new legislation on the standards of vehicles is very, very much reduced, and it will get much better as the years go by.
I was thinking about you as I was driving up Reigate Hills there behind a truck belching out black smoke. Keep on telling us that they're getting cleaner, but they don't seem to be to me.
Oh, we have a problem here in as much as the new vehicles, of course, are set up against very high standards. Smoke levels and noise levels, in our opinion, will be ahead of Europe when we finally enter. But it takes time for new vehicles to creep into the business. People keep trucks for about 5 to 7 years, so it will take time for them to come in. But you mentioned the question of going up Reigate Hill. This points the case of town planning and roads and all of this kind of thing. The industry can't improve the environment on its own. It needs improved roads and better town planning.
But with this in mind, you see, we're now being asked if we will take our vehicles up to 40 tons from 32. Now, 40 tons shattering through quite small villages in Britain, can they really take it?
Well, of course they can't. They have to have bypasses to take these heavier vehicles. But just to bear this point in mind, if you want to carry 1,000 tons, you can carry 1,000 tons on 48 32 tonners or 38 40 tonners, which in fact takes 10 trucks off the road. And it can be shown since 1965 that the heavy truck population has in fact decreased, and therefore there is more road space for all your motorists.
I noticed one thing in this show, and that is that all the cabs are getting much more comfortable for the drivers, much more habitable for them. They've got adjustable seats, they've got ventilation, they've all got radio. Do you think that driver fatigue has added to the problem of, the whole problem really, of accidents, lorry accidents?
Oh, I think it impinges on it, and we're very much aware of this, that it's one thing to make a driver very comfortable, but he's got to be kept alert. And again, this is a combination of the road system he drives on and the kind of vehicle. We now make vehicles which we can quite honestly say are the safest in the world. And it's true of any vehicle, motor car or truck, the most unsafe thing in it, in fact, is the driver. So we've got to go for driver education. We have to educate the operators themselves to make the best utilization of drivers. This, I think, over the coming years will show a significant improvement.
A great many of us private motorists really did get upset whenever we see a motorway crash. We seem to be blamed for it all the time. But then it turns out that 3/4 of the vehicles involved are heavy trucks.
Oh, I would share it 50-50, you know. Half the cars run under the back of the trucks. And I think that the real problem on the motorway is what the Americans call tailgating. And people really should stand off from the vehicles, whether they're truck drivers or motor car drivers. We really have to educate them that they cannot stop in 10 or 12 feet at 70 miles an hour.